quick commerce has become something that is so penetrated in India that a new brand can actually build its revenue exclusively on quick commerce and get to about $1 million a month, 10 crores a month in revenue. We are brand starved. So naturally, these new brands get the attention of the younger generation because they're looking for something new. If you're not on quick commerce today, it's actually something that's very risky. So many of the traditional brands have not jumped on that bandwagon. They're actually losing out as a result.
Is it just a urban India thing, quick commerce, or is this going to really change the way Indians are going to purchase stuff permanently? Welcome to Hard Truths by Vertex. Today I'm joined by Ben Mathias, managing partner at Vertex Ventures Southeast Asia and India, to discuss why consumer will always be an important sector in India and how new age brands are scaling faster, cheaper, and smarter than ever before. Let's talk to him. So, Ben, VC historically has been about investing in cutting edge tech, but we tend to invest in a lot of consumer products, in meat, beauty products, and things like that. Why is that?
Well, at Vertex, Southeast Asia and India, first of all, we do invest in a lot of cutting edge tech. There are primarily three sectors that we invest in. One is technology, enterprise technology / software / AI. The second is fintech. And the third is consumer. And the reason consumer is such a big thing is that we are investing in Southeast Asia and India. And these are emerging economies where consumption is growing. And the younger generation is increasingly consuming digitally. They're discovering and consuming digitally. So there may have been brands that I grew up with that had been around for 20, 30 years. But those brands are not digitally native. They're primarily offline. And the millennial and the Gen Z generation like to do their shopping and discovery online. So we've seen the opportunity for new brands to emerge that are digital first. And they target the younger generation. Now, it's much cheaper to build a brand digital first compared to traditionally building a brand offline. In the past, it has cost about $10 to $15 million to build a brand through the traditional ways, because you got to build the offline infrastructure, you've got to advertise on billboards, you need to build the offline storefronts. Today, you can build a brand for between $1 and $3 million. Because your advertising happens on Meta or on YouTube. You get influencers to do your brand building for you. You get discovered online and you get sold through the marketplaces or through your own D2C website, or more recently in India, quick commerce. So you don't need all that investment in offline infrastructure. So what we've discovered here is that new digital brands can be set up quickly at a relatively low cost. They have high gross margins.
Yeah.
We've seen gross margins of 60 to 70%. And as long as you engage your customer base, you have high repeat rates. So they tend to be pretty good venture capital investments.
So you mentioned gross margins are high, right? Why is that different in comparison to maybe not digitally native brands?
Well, because you don't have the expenses of the offline expenses that the traditional brands have. You're building a brand without those expenses. You have lower carrying costs because you're selling through digital channels. You don't need to stock every physical store. You don't need to advertise on billboards. And as long as you get the attention of your customer base, you can continue to engage them. And every time you launch new products, you can continue to make them aware of the new products, make them aware of the benefits. The key here is to use influencers effectively so that the influencers keep your customer base engaged and they keep coming back for more.
So in comparison to a matured market like US, how is the brand building different in emerging markets like India, Southeast Asia?
Well, so first of all, in the markets like the US, there are hundreds of thousands of brands.
Yeah.
And brands are getting created every day. But what is different in our markets here is that we are brand starved. We have relatively few brands. So if you take, for example, beauty and cosmetics, until about 10 years ago, you had the same 10 to 15 brands that had been around for 30 years. And it's only in the last 5 to 10 years that new beauty cosmetics brands have been created. So naturally, these new brands get the attention of the younger generation because they're looking for something new. Unlike in the mature markets, there is an opportunity here to create new brands. Now, the way you get to your customer, whether it's the US, whether it's any other mature market, or whether it's here, Southeast Asia and India, you still have to get to your customer through digital ads. You still have to sell online. Eventually, you sell offline as well. The one difference that we have in India that is kind of unique to India is that India has now started selling on quick commerce. And quick commerce has become something that is so penetrated in India that a new brand can actually build its revenue exclusively on quick commerce and get to about $1 million a month, 10 crores a month in revenue. And this is very unique to India. And if you're not on quick commerce today, it's actually something that's very risky. And so many of the traditional brands have not jumped on that bandwagon. They're actually losing out as a result.
Is it just a urban India thing, quick commerce, or is this going to really change the way Indians are going to purchase stuff permanently?
Well, to be honest, I was a skeptic when quick commerce first came out. And I kept asking myself, why would you need something in 10 minutes? But it's amazing how quickly you get used to getting that craving for potato chips satisfied in 10 minutes. And what we've seen in the last 2 years is that quick commerce has pretty much penetrated the top 50 cities in the country. And what this means is now there are about between 2 and 300 million people in India that have access to quick commerce and are able to have the financial capability to shop on these quick commerce platforms. Now, what is unique about India? So why has it happened only in India, not in other countries? There are really three things. Number one is population density. The kind of density we have in India is not seen in most other parts of the world. Number two is that the labor is so cheap. There is somebody willing to deliver that bag of potato chips for you at a very low cost. And that cost is so low that it is still worthwhile for you to buy that rather than you go walking to the neighborhood store to pick it up yourself. And number three, I say this a little sheepishly, is that the traffic rules are a little lenient for two-wheelers in India. So a delivery boy can, if he needs to deliver something in a few minutes, he can drive on the sidewalk or drive on a one-way street to get that to you. And again, we all wish that the rules were being enforced, but as a result of that, we are actually getting our products delivered quickly. So really the confluence of these three things has made quick commerce really established in the country.
When e-commerce initially came, both in the US and in India, people thought that this would be the primary way people would purchase. But then even if you look after, even after 20, 25 years, it's just a very low percentage, right? Like maybe 10 to 20% now. You think quick commerce can grab a bigger market share of the traditional retail?
Well, I think there will be a subset of products that lend themselves very well to quick commerce. The high volume products, something that you need to buy on a daily basis. So bread, eggs, those kinds of things, milk, which you need on a regular basis. And the thing is, these things, you're used to getting them in 10, 15 minutes because the kirana store is nearby. And you can just step out of your house, walk to the kirana store and buy it. Now, quick commerce is just doing that for you. So I think those products will be there on quick commerce, and you have the choice. You can either order it through quick commerce or do it the traditional way and walk to the kirana. What will happen, I think, is that there'll be some products which will be delivered in 10 minutes and some that you may have to wait an hour or two. So some of the lower volume products. I mean, right now you can buy a new phone on the quick commerce platform. But does it really matter if you get that in 10 minutes or 20 minutes or versus 2 hours? It probably doesn't. And the quick commerce players will realize sooner or later that it's much more cost efficient to have one central warehouse in a city where you store these high value items, high value, low volume items. And it's okay if it takes 2 hours. And then for the high volume items, you have a warehouse in every micro neighborhood. And these warehouses are not that expensive. They don't have to be a storefront on a main street. They don't need to look good. It could be in a basement. It could be in a narrow lane narrow, dusty lane, where the rent is low, because none of your customers are actually seeing where the warehouse is. So I think quick commerce will penetrate the entire population. It just depends on which products get sold in 1 hour versus 10 minutes.
Could it kill kirana stores, you think?
I don't think so. So what I think will happen is that kirana stores themselves will adopt technology in order to service their customers in 10 minutes. Now, in the past, you could actually call the kirana store and they would deliver it to your house. And all of us used to do that. Now, so there's just a small behavioral change, which means instead of calling the store, you just get on an app. We have actually invested in some technology called company called Kapiva that is empowering the kirana store. So giving them that capability to take quick commerce orders. And delivery boys anyway work for different organizations. You could basically partner with a delivery organization and the delivery boy gets the notification on his app and he knows where to pick it up and where to drop it off. So I don't think the kirana stores will get killed. They will actually jump on this bandwagon.
So one really good experience that I've had in Bangalore was I was supposed to fly back to Singapore in 3 days, and I was telling my wife, you should probably order online my protein powder, and then she actually found it in quick commerce and got it in 10 minutes. That was like mind blowing. But you've invested in consumer brands. Even when internet penetration was not so high in India, like in brands like FirstCry. When you compare that to like the brands that we've invested recently, like a Kapiva or a Pilgrim, what are the challenges for a FirstCry versus the some of the newer brands that we have invested?
I think at Vertex, we invested in FirstCry probably 14, 15 years ago. And the challenge that they had was buying behavior was still offline. In fact, I remember when my son was born 17 years ago, there was only one shop in the whole of Bangalore that I was aware of which sold diapers. So literally every weekend, we would have to drive to MG Road and buy diapers for the whole week. And I kept thinking, how different would things be if you could actually have this delivered to the house, order it online? And then a few years later, actually, I was standing in line at my son's preschool to pick him up. The after school is over, and there were two moms standing in front of me, and they were chatting, and I overheard the conversation. They were talking about this platform called FirstCry, which they were able to buy a lot of their baby products, not just the diapers, but also toys and food and things like that. And I straight away went back, looked it up, and got in touch with Supam, and we invested in the company. And of course, it's turned out to be a very successful company. It IPO'd recently. But the challenge that FirstCry had is very different from a challenge that a brand today would have. Then the challenge was getting people to start buying online because people are still not used to it. Today, if you're starting a new brand, your challenge is engaging your customers because now everybody buys online. That is pretty standard part of the buying behavior. How do you get their attention? How do you get discovered online? And how do you keep introducing new products so that your customers, the interest level continues? And so it's a very different dynamic now.
And also, it's a lot easier like you said, the cost of building a brand is a lot lesser. So a lot more people could do it. So competition is higher. And
correct. So today, because the cost of building a brand is lower, it means lower barrier to entry.
Yeah.
So I may have a brand that's doing very well, but how do I know that somebody else is not going to come along and for the same low cost of $1 to $3 million, build a new brand? So you've got to keep building new products. You've got to keep introducing new products, and you've got to keep your customers aware of these new products, get them to try them. And if you don't do that, you risk losing out on being the leader.
For all brands, even from FirstCry to the newer brands, retail is still the way forward after a certain point, right?
Yeah. So what we are advising our companies to do today is get leadership primarily online. And this comes from three ways. One is through your own website slash app. Second is through marketplaces like Amazon, Flipkart. And third is through quick commerce. Now, once you get that leadership, once you get to say $1 million a month, let's say, that's when you start looking for um, offline channels. And you start small. You don't build your own storefronts. You start stocking your product in other stores. Um, and over time, you build your own storefronts. And those could be kiosks in an airport or in a mall. And then eventually you build your own shopping experiences. But it's a process. You start online and you graduate to offline.
And how is it different to for let's say FirstCry?
Well, FirstCry actually had to go offline much sooner. And as I said, in the when FirstCry got started, buying behavior was still not online. Now, they started off as an online platform, but they realized that they had to be offline as well. Uh, and the offline presence served two purposes. One is it was a second channel, but the second is also give credibility to the online channel. And so when people saw the FirstCry store in their neighborhood, they straight away recognized that this is a brand that sold good products, and then they would go online and buy.
Yeah.
Today, you don't need to go offline so quickly. You can take your time. You do that much later.
And other thing that I think of when building a consumer brand is that for a lot of categories, especially if it's a premium product, you always question the TAM, right? Because the number of people in a country like India with a purchasing power is still very, very low. So, is that true?
Well, it depends on the product that you're selling.
Yeah.
If you're selling a premium product, then obviously the TAM is low. We tend to invest in what we call mass premium. So some of the brands that we have backed are Pilgrim, which is in beauty, Nook, which is home appliances, Licious, which is in food, and Kapiva, which is in wellness. These are all mass premium products. What that means is it can be sold to anybody, to the sort of the top 20% of the people in India. And there you're talking about 300 million people, right? Any people who are earning per capita income of anywhere between sort of $8,000 to $10,000 and above. That is a huge TAM. And these people don't exist only in the metros, they exist in the tier 1 cities and the tier 2 cities. And in fact, I read a report recently that said that the tier 2 cities are growing the fastest in India right now on e-commerce. They're growing 60% year on year, faster than the metros and the tier 1. So the TAM is large if you get the right product at the right price and target it to the right people.
Yeah. So, okay, just making a simple comparison, Nook is a cheaper product than, let's say, Dyson. if Dyson were like a startup, would we consider investing at that price point?
Nook is basically selling a similar product category to Dyson, but with more modern designs that appeal to a younger generation. And they're selling them online. And therefore, they're getting discovered by the younger generation, by people who are just starting out. And the designs and the colors and maybe the functionality is more appealing to them. So they prefer to buy something that appeals to them rather than what their parents used to buy. So that's why we invested in Nook. And we're seeing the traction that they're getting. The Nook is scaling month on month, they're scaling, growing double digit. And we continue to look for the companies like that.
If it's an extremely premium product, is there enough of a market in India?
Yeah, so extremely premium products, there is a market, but you're talking about less people.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a category like jewelry. Okay. Now, people have traditionally looked at jewelry as an investment and buy jewelry in that costs like lakhs of rupees, $1,000, $2,000. But there is an opportunity here for what we call demi-fine jewelry, which costs 10,000 rupees. And people are more likely to buy that more often, not as an investment, but as something to wear to work, something to wear for a party. And they buy based on the designs and not based on the carats. So we have just invested in a company called Pulmonas, which builds demi-fine jewelry. And we've seen the scale that they're getting, and they're selling all across the country. And so the TAM for that, from what we can see, is incredibly large, because the threshold to be able to buy a product from Pulmonas is much lower than if you were to buy something from Tanishq.
I recently came across this tweet from Razorpay founder. So he was saying that when they were working on their deck and estimating the market, the total the payment space in India they estimated to be $200 billion, and right now they're doing 180 billion themselves, and plus like you have this UPI which is doing insane volumes, right? So how do you estimate TAM if you're like a founder?
Well, I tell you how we estimate TAM as VCs.
Yeah.
Um, one good way uh, to estimate what the TAM is you look at the traditional players. So let's take something like nutraceuticals. If you take a category like that, a nutraceutical is a product that you consume for wellness.
Okay.
Right. So it's not a medicine; it's a supplement. Right. Now there are large established companies that sell nutraceuticals in India. $1 billion plus in revenue. There are probably at least 10 of them. Whether it's Herbalife or whether it's divisions of Unilever or Dabur, etc. So we know the TAM is large. You add all these up, this comes to $10 to $20 billion of revenue annually. People are buying nutraceutical products. So why can a new age company not set up a new nutraceutical brand and start selling online to a different TG and through digital channels? And we've seen that. So we invested in Kapiva. Now, Kapiva is selling Ayurvedic products. And Ayurveda is as old as India is, right? And Ayurvedic companies have been in India since pre-independence days and in the billions of dollars. But how could somebody like Kapiva come and build a company that does so well in a sector like this? The reason is they created a new TAM, which is the next generation of people, the people in their 20s and their 30s. And they were looking for the same benefit, but they were looking for a product that they could understand more. They didn't want to just buy the product because their parents and grandparents brought it. They wanted to understand what are the benefits of the product. And they would discover the product digitally, they discover the benefits digitally, and then make the purchase. And similarly, we've seen in other categories where the traditional players are selling in the tens of billions of dollars, and then you get a new startup coming in and scaling to 1-2 million very quickly by launching innovative products.
So one way you're saying is that we look at the existing players and how much of a value they're doing, and then you try to see um, what could be the potential. How do you estimate, let's say, product market fit?
Yeah, so product market fit is clearly one of the key things here to assess. You're building a product, and does the market really need it? And I'll be honest with you, there are some investments we have missed out on because we were not convinced of the product market fit, and in some cases we were wrong. So we first met Pilgrim when they were doing about $100,000 of revenue a month. And we actually said no to them at that time because we didn't think that they could actually go up against the large established players in India and really have a product that people would want to buy. But thankfully, we kept in touch with the founders, and 18 months later, we got an update from them. They had scaled by more than 10 times in 18 months. And at that point, we were very convinced of the product market fit. There was absolutely no ambiguity there. And so we made an offer. We led the next round, and the company's continued to scale ever since.
We've backed Pilgrim in beauty, Kapiva in wellness, Licious in meat, and you also mentioned Pulmona. So what are the other categories that are interesting at the moment to you?
Well, we are continuing to look at opportunities in food and beverage. I think food and beverage is a very interesting sector because it lends itself very well to quick commerce. So on quick commerce, you get a craving, you get that craving satisfied in 10, 15 minutes. So we've seen companies that are building snacking products, that are building bakery products. So that is one sector that we're looking at. The other one is nutrition and wellness. And there are different personas in India that look for nutrition and wellness products. Uh, One is, of course, the fitness enthusiast. Um, the second is the aging person who's getting older, and that's trying to stay young, trying to retain their youth. People like myself. Um, the third is vegetarians who need the protein, and they're looking for ways to get the protein. And then the fourth is just people who lead an active lifestyle and are just looking for supplements to keep their energy levels up. So there are multiple companies that are selling products in nutrition and wellness that we have seen, whether it's protein, whether it's magnesium, vitamins, other forms of supplements. So that's the other sector that we're tracking a lot. We're also tracking home and living. And just like Nook, there are other categories in home and living that are seeing a lot of growth in the country because, again, Indians are earning more. The younger generation is creating their own households. They're not living with their parents anymore, so they need to buy their own furniture, they need to buy their own appliances. So that's the other category that we're looking at quite actively.
It's not just India. We also invest a lot in consumer brands in Southeast Asia. Has that helped maybe identify products in India?
We are one fund, we are one Southeast Asia plus India fund, single team, single investment committee. And the deals that our colleagues in Southeast Asia look at, we are aware of them in India and vice versa. So we are able to share the learnings with each other. So in Southeast Asia, we've invested in multiple consumer companies. So we've invested in Coolmate in Vietnam, which is an apparel company in Vietnam. Janice Wong is a food company, chocolate company in Singapore, but selling globally. We've invested in Kopiko, which is a coffee chain in Malaysia. Dailyco is a house of food brands in Indonesia. And then RPG in Malaysia, which is a house of home and living brands, brands like Montego and Classic Cookware. Now, there are some benchmarks that apply across all these geographies. Right? Things like assessing the TAM, assessing the product market fit, looking at repeats, looking at gross margins. These things apply across the board. Of course, as I mentioned, quick commerce is something unique to India. But in Indonesia, for example, we've seen small storefronts is something that is more relevant there. So we had looked at a lot of apparel companies in India, and we had not invested in any of them because none of them really hit our threshold benchmarks. But when Coolmate came along in Vietnam, our team knew exactly what to look for. And we saw Coolmate had superior metrics compared to most of the other companies we've seen. And then we jumped in and invested in Coolmate. So the learnings from one geography can easily translate and easily be used in the other geography.
Does it also help us support our portfolio company better?
Yeah, there are multiple things that we take away from companies that don't do well. When a company fails, then you take the learnings from that. Why did this company fail? In fact, when we meet twice a year, our entire team meets twice a year, and one of the items of the agenda is just discussing companies where we lost money and companies that failed, and going into the reasons for why they failed. And the reason is not to belabor the past, but it is to basically learn for the future. And working capital, for example, some companies did not manage their working capital properly. There are some companies that did not manage their brand architecture properly. So, for example, you have a brand that stands for something, and when you want to expand your product offering, people link your brand to the old product and don't necessarily link it to the new product. So you got to make the brand as generic as possible so that you can build upon it. So there are multiple things we've seen. The key in venture capital is to not just celebrate your successes, but learn from your mistakes. And that's what we do very seriously at Vertex.
Yeah. So besides consumer products, we've also invested in consumer, maybe entertainment service, something like Cuckoo FM. So I didn't think that Indians would pay for content. When I was growing up, that was not a thing.
But yeah, people have started to pay for what Cuckoo is doing. What happened?
Well, to be honest, even we were not sure. When we invested in Cuckoo FM, we were also not sure if people would pay for content. Um, there were three people who were very, very sure that Indians would pay for content. And those are the three founders of Cuckoo FM. The first 2 years, everything was free. And then they started charging, and it was incredible the way people were willing to pay for good content. And the key here is number one, you've got to obviously produce good content that people want, that they feel compelled to keep listening to. But it's also the second one is to price it properly. So you price it for 199 rupees, 199 rupees, 299, depending on what level of premium content the user wants to subscribe to. And people will pay that. That bite-size amount is something that people do not have a hesitation in paying. And the good thing now is you have auto pay on UPI. So it takes away that inconvenience of having to keep paying every month. The flip side of that, of course, is that sometimes subscribers get an auto pay and they forget about it. And then they realize that they've been charged for the last 6 months and they've not used the product. And then there's a bit of a backlash.
Yeah. I guess the key still is to make great content.
Yeah, the key is to make great content. So if you go to Cuckoo FM, you will see that they have, and by the way, they have both audio content and video content now. They recently launched Cuckoo TV, which is video content. They have a series there that may have 50, 100 episodes. And each of these are like 2-3 minutes long. But they're so gripping. You listen to the first episode, you want to go to the next one. And after you go to the next one, you want to go to the next one. So you've got to create good content. And one of the big tipping points for Cuckoo FM happened about 18 months ago, which is they realized that you could use AI to create phenomenal content. Before that, the content was all created by humans. But once they adopted AI, they could order of magnitude increase the content that they put out.
And also faster, cheaper.
Faster and cheaper. There are still humans involved because you still need a human to kind of determine the storyline and put the right prompt into the AI to come up with the story. But what would take days to create in the past now takes minutes. So it's much faster and it's much cheaper. So you've got to, and as we've seen in any other entertainment platforms like Netflix, for example, you've got to keep putting out new content every week. Yeah. If it's the same old content, then people don't come back to the platform and then they will unsubscribe. Yeah. So Cuckoo FM has done that very successfully.
There are some brands, right? Like Ultra Human is one that I know of that quickly expanded overseas because probably they were selling a product that didn't have enough of a consumer base in India. Do you see more of that happening with the consumer products and services in India?
Not really. Yeah. So actually, in the past, some of the consumer companies in India have tried to expand overseas very quickly and have had to pull back. So let's take Zomato, for example. Zomato, if you remember, when it first got started and they raised their Series A, Series B, their strategy was go global as soon as possible. And they went into the Middle East, they went to South America, Europe, etc. But they quickly realized that that was the wrong strategy. And to their credit, they scaled back and started focusing on India. And today they're a very successful company with business primarily in India. So what we advise our companies to do is just win your home market first. Win India. India is a large market. We talked about the TAM. Once you get established in India, then you start to explore nearer markets, like the Middle East, for example. Now, there are Indian diaspora that do exist in the Middle East and in other parts of the world that look for these products because they come to India, they try the products and they like them and then they want to keep buying them. So maybe you get distributorships in some of these closer countries, some work with some online, some localized online players. And it's only once you have a very stable revenue stream, stable and profitable revenue stream in your home country, which is India, it's only then that you go into countries like the US, which is very much later in the life cycle of the company.
Yeah. So you mentioned the current generation prefer newer stuff, different stuff. So what are some of the newer behavioral that you're seeing and the opportunities that comes along with it that we could invest in?
Well, we talked about consumer products like
Yeah.
home and living, food, etc. We talked about content. The other thing that we're seeing is travel. And the thing is, Indians love to travel. And they love to travel in groups. Now, in the last few years, these metrics are readily available anywhere. The amount of money Indians are spending on travel has been growing by 30-40% year on year. And of course, one type of travel is to travel abroad. But there's also a different form of travel that we're seeing in India, which is experiential travel within the country. And what do I mean by that? It is travel that is not for sightseeing, but it's travel just for a group of friends to get together, go to a nice place, hang out for a few days, and have a good time. So the category that we're seeing growing and we're quite excited about is a category called homestays, where these are villa stays in places like Goa, Rajasthan, Himachal, Lonavala, etc., and which cater to groups of 10 to 15 people. And this could be an extended family, it could be a group of friends, it could be multiple families coming together and spending a week and having a good time. So we just invested in a company called Elevas, which is doing exactly this. They're a brand of homestay villas that exist across the country, and you can book it on either on the Elevas platform or on Airbnb or any of your typical booking platforms.
Okay. So we've established that consumer is a big opportunity. There is a large enough TAM in India. But has VCs made money already, and can VCs make money investing in consumer?
Of course. And I think just look at the companies that have gone public in India, the e-commerce companies. I mentioned FirstCry. There are companies that are not in our portfolio like Zomato, Nykaa, etc., that have gone public. Flipkart got bought by Walmart. So the e-commerce companies have made a lot of money for VCs. The consumer brands have also made money for VCs. Again, we had Mamaearth that went public. And the interesting thing here is that the traditional players are also making acquisitions. So ITC, for example, acquired Yoga Bar. Unilever acquired Minimalist. So even the traditional players are realizing that there is value in some of these smaller companies that may be just nipping at their heels, but are growing nonetheless. So exits are not the problem. If company is growing and the company has good unit economics, it can either go to an IPO or it can get acquired. And we've seen that in our own portfolio, and we've seen that in the portfolio of other investors as well.
Yeah. This has been great. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks.